it doesn't matter what you film, how you film it. It's all about the end product. Student films, they don't look at budget at all. They don't look at the quality of the camera or the lens. It's not taken remotely into account. It is the fundamentals of what you're making right? And it doesn't matter whether you've shot it on your iPhone or whether you've shot it on an Arri 35 with a set of master primes, doesn't matter. Is the story, the editing, the cut, the tone, does it work?
Hi everyone, welcome to the Car Chat podcast. I am Sam Moores, and with me this week I have Al. Hello.
Hello, how are we doing?
Very good, very good. Welcome. Can you tell
Thank you very much.
The listeners sort of a short summary, a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I'm an automotive film director by trade. So I do a lot of basically car commercials is my main hobby and job and everything. It all seems to revolve around that I do. Can't escape it, and it's just the way it always is. So, but I have a fairly niche end of the spectrum. Like, we're basically, main clients are, Bugatti, Bentley, Aston, McLaren. So we're
the rubbish ones,
kind of dealing with the sort of the slow ones, the ones that you see on everyone's driveway, inconsequential footage.
Really relatable.
But the fun part of that is it doesn't mean that there's lots of budget involved. The bigger the company, the more expensive the car, the smaller the budgets. It's just an unusual thing, but it's a total misconception that I think everyone thinks you're rolling around with millions of pounds to spend, and
hundreds
it's
of people.
always and because they don't need to spend any money on marketing. It's not it's not like BM, or they're not competing with anyone. It's just like, do you want the Bugatti or not? Like, give us the money.
And apparently people do.
They really do.
We'll definitely get into a bit of how this all came about and stuff. But does that really affect how keen they are to do stuff? Because literally, like, some of these companies, I mean, let's say Ferrari's latest hypercar, obviously they've got to make some content, but it's going to sell out.
Yeah, it's a funny old thing. I think there's still, I believe in my head that we're sort of replacing the posters on the wall.
Yeah.
Because we don't really have the magazines. We don't have those unfolded posters. You don't get that kind of like nice crinkled blue tack thing on the bedroom posters anymore. At least, I don't think that happens much anymore, if at all. And I think media has essentially replaced that. And I think that's what they're kind of doing the most. They're creating the content so that those things are out there, they're in front of people, and they're under them. And sometimes, these cars are so unobtainable for most people that I think they need to sometimes just show what they're actually about, that they're not just, whilst they are, objectively works of art, in terms of engineering terms, styling, be up to your choice. But sometimes it's really cool to see these things actually moving and what they do, and also kind of defining, because ironically it's getting quite a saturated market. I can't get over how many multi-million pound hypercars exist now. It's probably quite hard for them to define actually who they are in comparison to another one and sort of separate themselves a little bit. So there's a little bit of that goes on. And then also, which I quite like the sort of the image of, is that a lot of these people who can afford these cars sometimes get peer pressured into by their friends. Go like, that's the one you want, that's the cool one. Like, you don't want that one. What are you doing with that one? That's the children's supercar. I think that goes all the way to the top. So whilst you're not doing necessarily, like outrageous stunts and a lot of like content for the content's sake, because these brands don't really make any money off that, and they do have limited marketing because they actually spend their money for their marketing in different ways. They're doing a much more personal experience for their customers, right? They're not doing a big, like, oh, come on, everyone have a test drive. You're getting actually just the customer down. They're flying him in, giving him a experience, and then he'll make the car his own.
And part of that is, I think that is interesting, because if I think about a brand, which I think was we can probably debate it, but the first sort of modern, not hypercar brand, but very expensive car brand to fully embrace bringing in proper videos and stuff, I would say it was kind of like Singer. Not necessarily like a high end whatever, but just getting in. They got in Chris Harris and whatever to be part of the development. And that was a shift. That seemed to be a huge shift, which then goes, oh, we know a lot more about the brand. We know a lot more about what it's about. And it's from someone that's like, we know.
Yeah, I think the whole world had to refine its voice in terms of how they market cars very, very quickly. You know, social media what was around in like 2000, 2001, but 2000 but it didn't become, I don't think, particularly relevant to brands probably until like 2010 maybe. Like, you know, I can't even remember what year Instagram started, but I remember thinking, you know, it was just kind of like a little like picture book, wasn't it? It was a diary, and now it's a fundamental core. It's the fundamental spine of everyone's marketing teams. It's like, does it work on Instagram, and does it? You know, YouTube, I think, is making a bit of a comeback. Thankfully, I think the pendulum's swinging back again to slightly more intelligent,
slightly going
meaningful. Slightly more meaningful content. And trust me, I can rant for hours about filming cars in portrait. Like,
that's the worst.
It is. Oh, dude, like it's. I can list so many problems with it. Like, particularly the fact that cars are not portrait shaped.
Yep.
If the goal, if just to film double-decker buses, then fine. That is, Instagram's made for it. But like cars, you end up with this tiny slither of a car in the middle of the screen, mostly floor, mostly sky, and it just looks rubbish. And there's no art, there's no framing. It's just, everything's just in the middle. It's just, it's meh. But you have to, you know, all the content you make has to work for it. And it's such a big part now of like what we think about when we're shooting stuff. You know, we're shooting stuff deliberately a tiny bit too wide that's comfortable on a 16:9 so that we can get at least something into a 916, and we'll sometimes digitally extend the top and the bottom of the screen if we got not quite shot it wide enough and you have to get the car in the shot. It's unbelievably complex now, and you're sort of ticking boxes to make sure that it works rather than creating, I think, that kind of blank canvas of going like, right, we're going full anamorphic, you know, 2x squeeze lenses, and you're going to create some beautiful piece of storyline that involves, like, perhaps there's always a separation. The car is over here and the person is over here, and there's always this line in them. But you can't do any of that anymore. It's like, is it in the middle? Yeah, cool. And that's it.
It's in the middle, and is there so much space around it that it's like a tiny dot?
That's just, it's infuriating. But unfortunately, that is how it is. And that is content that everything revolves around the numbers now. You know, people just look at numbers, they measure their success on numbers. The irony being, of course, that Instagram doesn't give these people a penny. There's no, I don't really think there's any sort of reason. You know, they can pump out a film and a thing every single day, and I don't know what the value of those metrics truly is. I know that people go, well, it's, you know, brand awareness, building the brand size and everything, but if anything, it kind of penalizes companies when they go to do something. So, for example, if you rent the Nordschleife out, you get specifically penalized in terms of cost based on the follower count from your social media.
Really?
So yeah, massive difference. You know,
so you're like, we're just renting it for this shed down the road, and then they're like, well, hang on, there's 6 Ferraris here.
There's a great reason why when we did a drift film at the Nürburgring, we did it as Ford Performance and not Ford. You know, because it was tiny by comparison. And it worked with the brand as well. But there are reasons, you know. But the thing is, like, we're just kind of like so limited now. It feels like everything has to be, you know, it's part of the deliverable package. When you shoot a commercial, you don't feel like you're really kind of you're not taking into account really that expressive creativity that you wanted to have with the visuals. You're now always thinking about, is the final shot going to work? And, you know, the hero shot at the end, you do 2. If we're doing it in full CGI, we'll re-render a different version just in 916 compatible sort of format, and it doesn't slap. You know, that final shot, it was always going to be the one that you're like, wow, that's a beautiful frame. That's kind of where the hero moment of the film is. And you don't get that anymore in the sort of the 916 content. But I do love that people are starting to push back and going, screw you, Instagram, and I'm going to do a 16:9 version and make you turn your phone.
Yeah.
And there's going to be some very lazy people out there who will watch a 16:9 film the wrong way and sort of.
And then sometimes your phone does the flip where it just starts putting it upside down and stuff, and you're like, oh man.
Yeah, it's disaster. But I think there is now, with the kind of like the YouTube slightly coming back, I think YouTube long form content, people have like, I don't know about yourself, but like definitely with myself, I really can't stand that kind of the ADHD content that's just there's no substance to it. Whilst it's kind of like fine for just kind of like sitting there looking at some stuff, actually I desperately miss the storytelling in the, even in a 1 minute film, you can have story and emotion and stuff. And so now that these long form content in YouTube is starting to get a bit of a resurgence again, I think that shows that there is a demand for intelligence from people who love cars. Yeah. It's not just go to the takeover and watch someone do a burnout in McDonald's.
And there is that thing, isn't it? Like when, let's say 2010, that sort of time or whatever, if you had a viral clip, like a little clip, everyone would know about it. And everyone would kind of been talking about it for a while. Like we all say like, oh, the whatever, the blah, blah, blah. And you're like, oh yeah, the one where someone tries to pop in my head, jumps into an ice lake and it doesn't break and just like bounces. You're like, everyone at the time would have known that clip. Whereas now there's so many that like, if you can last a week, that's kind of pretty incredible.
And people are now constructing them. They're taking the viral clip. I don't even think the word viral is used anymore, which is, it's like, because nothing goes viral. It's just, I think it just exists right now. So it's just weird. And then people go, oh, cool. That bit where the lady fell over or she had an argument. There's a clip somewhere, I think, of a woman holding up a towel to a mirror. And they're filming it from an oblique angle. And that she's going, how does the mirror know what I'm doing from that angle? And the husband's like, it's a mirror. Like it's a mirror. Like, but how does it know what I'm doing? It can't see me. And I'm like, it mirrors. And then I suddenly saw like 3 versions of that. And they're all pretending to be exactly the same thing. And you suddenly realize that, oh yeah, it's all nonsense. And everyone's just getting the clicks and the views. And it's trying to reach almost this like social status with their Instagram follower account, which, it comes from not from the love of a craft, but just from like, I just want these numbers, and it's arbitrary.
Yeah. I don't really open Instagram anymore. Like really, I don't. I watch YouTube videos, like 10-minute plus videos all the time. I love like getting into something, learning a bit, finding a bit more about something. And do you think, does your brain now think Instagram first in terms of like vertical formats?
When we're making commercials,
or just literally, do you now take photos? I remember that for me, there was a point in time. I
do take photos.
Where a lot of photos
now,
vertical rather than, there was a point where I was like, well, why would you do that? Obviously it's a car. Yeah. Obviously it's horizontal.
Obviously, yeah. I do take videos vertically on my phone.
Oh, wow. See, that's interesting.
Yeah, because I know where it's going to end up. It's going to go up on a 9:16 reel, and I spend, I do take photos. I still try and take photos properly, 9:16, 16:9. But the videos, I pretty much default to vertical. I don't even try because I know that it's inevitably, if I'm going to put it out on Instagram as my own, because I don't really put my work on Instagram either. It's like really bad, but my like car diaries, as it were, is always generally vertical format because it's just easier to make it because it looks ugly if I do it the other way around. And I know that I'm not chasing numbers, but at the same time, sometimes it's nice if it works and it goes a little bit wide because
not chasing pain.
So I'm just not chasing. Yeah, but I'm also I'm contradicting myself massively slightly here. Well, I think the problem is that I know where it's going to end up, and therefore I kind of set myself up going, right, I'm just going to make it so that it works on the platform that I'm going to essentially share it with. It used to, my Instagram, for example, which is not really very big, but it was for me, it's like here are my car adventures. Here's what I do. There's not really any behind the scenes of me working because I can rarely share that anyway. And it's just like, here is something stupid that I went and did. And that's kind of like, and if you're into it, cool. And if you're not, well, I'm sorry, I was interrupted your feed. I don't put any like personal life really on there or anything. It's just like, here is some fun I'm having. And I think that's the one thing with Instagram is every single person, we're getting quite deep into this now, but like every single person is doing exactly the same thing, really. It's the highlight moments. And it's the same with car companies, brands. They're creating highlight moments, perfect scenarios. You're looking at a phone, everything is perfection. There's no real trauma that's, or anything that's bad that's put out there that's not, that comes from those sources. Obviously, there's some really bad stuff on the internet, and Instagram, but, generally, people are trying to say, like here is happy life. So yeah, but to answer your question, I would say, yeah, I do think about Instagram when I'm filming stuff on my phone first. But when we shoot a commercial, that also is at the forefront of like, can we make this work in this format? And this dictates so much about what is made these days. And I think that's really what's killed off. I mean, rental houses, they just don't rent out real lenses anymore because no one's shooting it that way. Yeah, it's no one's shooting it that way because everyone has to be ready for the way round that actually the brands they don't actually look at the YouTube metrics anymore. It used to be, I did really well on YouTube. No one cares. It's never ever brought up in a meeting when something did well. They only go, oh yeah, we did okay, but the Instagram really popped off, and you're like, okay, that's cool. That's the one I hated. Never mind then. All that sound design while someone sits there on a toilet watching on mute, going, oh, that's cool.
Yeah, is there a caption?
We spent like 3 days getting that mix perfect and getting all the transients amazing, so the bass really kind of came through and didn't muddy up the engine sounds. And the grade spent like thousands of pounds at a grading house in London to get the color right, and someone's watching it on dim the wrong way around to go cool. And then like they move to the next reel and it's a guy falling up a scaffolding or something. So it's the longevity as well. Stuff doesn't really hang around anymore, as you say. It's gone in 24 hours now. They used to be. I mean, I've been doing this since 2006. So I've sort of seen that whole transition happen from when you were kind of had like content that was meaningful. Car Magazine, which was one of my first ever paid jobs, were quite early on in the car review video game. And those reviews, they would do one video a month because, I remember the very first job I did, when I turned up, the photographer was like, what do you mean you're making a video? And it was like, well, how long do you need? Like 20 minutes? I'm like, dude, I need like 2 days. Like, I've got to make a video. I'm going to make a film. And they're like, right, you're not just doing like a piece to camera in front of a car. Like, yeah. And that for a while became that really interesting transition period between the photographer having absolutely, you had to do an 8-page spread and, full feature and stuff. And you had to get, let's say, 60 banging photos, and you had to make like 8 of them awesome, like proper rig, and a front cover and stuff. And now it's the video that absolutely dominates, and the photographer's lucky to get like an hour with the car. I remember George GF Williams on the pod recently, right? And he knows the pain of going from being the dominant person on the shoot,
photographer first,
to being like, yeah, George, you can definitely have the car in a bit, like, don't worry. And then like an hour later, he's like, yeah, no, in a bit. Like, it's because the problem is brands do still value photography massively. I'm working on a project at the moment. We've got a commercial coming with Aston Martin, and they understand very well that the value of the photography, it remains dominant on the website. People still visit the .com quite a lot. And the photography is the backing to many of the events and bits and pieces like that. They're not taking film frames, and that is a big part of it. And they still put a good weight on the importance of photography. Some brands kind of don't really mind too much. They know that they need the shots, but they're not that fussed. But it depends who you go to and what you do, and it is interesting.
Do you think we're close to it just being film frames? Obviously CGI, it kind of is, but like in normal.
Sometimes I do, yeah. We've definitely provided like a still from a film because we get you get 25 chances a second to get a cool shot. So and those frames, they come under less scrutiny as well than photography. People will overanalyze a photo and they'll go like, oh, well, that little reflection here is, and the designers will be like, no, well, you can't see this crease line down there, and you're like, yeah. And in video, no one cares. They're like, oh, does it look cool? Yeah, it does. Yeah, cool.
Yeah. Because
the car's in motion, you've got light moving across the surfaces, and the context of the shape is way easier to kind of understand. And then the film frames kind of look cool because they've got a different vibe to them. They're less retouched. They're kind of a bit flatter and a little bit more moody sometimes, or they've got more, the motion blur is generally a little bit draggier because we're running at a 50th of a second all the time. And there's that kind of like, choice of frames where the car angle isn't necessarily perfect, but the vibe is good. And sometimes you can just do it off the vibe. And then in CGI, if we're doing CGI film, we can upscale that to 8K, 12K, whatever. It doesn't matter.
Pick your angle. Job done. Yeah.
Bigger. Yeah, exactly. We can even, if we can even lower the camera, like, oh, I like that moment, but can you just tilt the camera down? You're like, yeah, sure. It doesn't matter. It's cheating, but there's a lot of work that goes into the other side of that, but that's a whole nother story.
Yeah. Right. So let's dial back a bit. When did you first start shooting video, and how did you get that first? Where did that first sort of car gig come about? Apologies for my creaky chair. I forgot. I needed to throw it in the bin.
I think it's mine as well. I think mine does it as well. That's fine. So I came out of a job in the music industry that I didn't really enjoy. It started off being awesome, but I didn't really dig it after a few months because it changed quite significantly when I was chucked back in an office and I didn't like it. So I kind of was desperate to kind of get out of the office life. Mm-hmm. And it just was never for me. And I'd sort of messed around with filming stuff during that time. At the time I lived in just south of the Brecon Beacons. So I used to go up with some pals. I used to go up and, drive around the roads, do some drifting, whatever, kind of muck around, but film it and kind of create little montage videos. So I kind of had a love for it. And then I remember one day we were up in the A4069 and Top Gear were up there filming. And they were filming, I think it was E60 M5, which, and I remember the road was closed. I'm like, that's cool. All right. That's and we got to see the truck and stuff. Yeah. And little did I know that one day I would be working with them and doing that. And that was cool. But that was kind of like, I remember that being quite an isolated moment. I was like, that's a cool moment. And we just didn't really think much of it and went off somewhere else because we couldn't see anything. I then had a little sort of like a period after I finished this music industry thing, trying to work out what I wanted to do. I did try some other quite very different things, quite extreme career choices, but didn't go through with them in the end for various reasons. And I ended up sort of wondering, like, I just want to do something for myself and my own business. And I kind of thought, well, that's what do I like? I like cars, and I quite bluntly I like Top Gear. And I was like, right, let's just see if we can do something. So I was running a little track day company business at the time as well. I started with a friend, and my idea was I would rent out little GoPro cameras, but before GoPros existed, they were little bullet cameras, little kind of like old little TV, like tiny little things. You kind of see them on V boxes, but way more archaic. And I would rent those systems out, burn a DVD for someone, and because no one really had GoPros, so you just give them the kit, they put them in the car, and they get a DVD of them driving on the track day, and it's great. And that was quite a simple thing. Eventually upgraded and bought a prosumer video camcorder with quite a big lens and a DV tape, I think it was, and started shooting a bit of B-roll for people on the track days so they could kind of get a drive-by of their car. And then a race driver said, "Oh, would you be interested in making a promo video for me?" And I was like, "Yep, that sounds cool." We ended up making a promo video. That went well. Really enjoyed it. And then during all of this time, I had been going to the Nürburgring since about 2002, 2003, and I got to know, I don't know if you know Jochen van Kalbridge very well, Frozen Speed. He's one of the OG, absolute one of the OG Nürburgring photographers. You know, he was always, we were, you know, great friends, and he was always, you know, set up camp in the piston clouds in the corner with his TV screen, setting up, you know, and selling photos on a Friday night after Tourist Fast, and then it was great. And he was contacted by Top Gear, Car Magazine, saying they're interested in doing some video reviews. Does he know anyone? And he said, "Well, yeah, I do." And that was me. And he knew I was sort of starting up. I'd been shooting some drifting as well, because the drifting is, you know, such a spectacular thing to film. And that was my first proper paid professional job, was going to the south of France for Cannes, and it was Bugatti Chiron Grand Sport Vitesse. Was it Vitesse? I can't remember. It was the convertible. It was the convertible. It was quite. And a you're good
like,
start.
yeah, I do this all the time.
As I'm suctioning my Manfrotto dirty suction cups to this Veyron, thinking like, please don't lift the paint, please don't lift the paint. And then that was again a bit of a like, this is awesome. This is actually really good fun. I can shoot shots, and we didn't have enough time, but it was good to be involved and see it. And that was my first kind of like proper press thing. And then that started snowboarding. I did a Ferrari, I think I did 430, so is it 16M, the convertible, I think. And we shot that in Maranello. And then whilst that was happening, there was this transition period of all the magazines were collapsing and everything was transitioning over to video. So as a result, loads of people were leaving the magazine industry and going into sort of startup agencies.
Yeah.
And one of the guys who had been part of the transition, a guy called Andy Thomas, he was working for a publishing company, a small, tiny little publishing company called FP in London. And he was like, he'd been obviously in contact with his car magazine friends. They had a small Jaguar gig for photography. And he said, would you come and shoot some video for us? Because we don't really need it, but at the same time, we want to provide it and kind of give them a commercial. So I was like, absolutely. So that was my first OEM gig.
Sick.
We turned up at this tiny little circuit called Guadix, I think it was. And the guys knew that there was a film shoot going on and a photo shoot. And the photo shoot was with an amazing photographer called Easton Chang. He had like the full proper mega rig, like the huge boom
big
arm
boxy
that
one.
That you bolt under the car, that takes, you know, like 2 hours to fit for one shot. And it's, you know, it's the kind of thing that Virtual Rig basically destroyed.
I was about to say, does anyone still use those, or almost like just use drones?
You do see them, but I think they're a vanity project.
Yeah.
If I'm honest, I don't think there's actually any need for them anymore. But it's a cool thing. And to be honest, like a lot of the cool cars, you can't even fit bolt stuff underneath anyway without removing all the undertrim.
Easton Chang.
Yeah. What a ledge.
Definitely follow all of his stuff.
Oh man, it is still fantastic. Yeah. And, you know, big Honda guy as well. So, you know, big respect. Anyway. And then the other guy that was there, from the Jaguar team was like, cool, so where's the crew for the film? Expecting presumably like a Panavision lorry to have turned up or something. And I'm like, hey, what's up? That's me. And he was like, right, okay, that's weird. You're going to have to stand back. I'm like, no, I promise we've got this. We can make a film. I've got all the equipment I need. I've got a camera, got a tripod, got bolt-on stuff. And we ended up attaching cars to rent cars, chasing this Jaguar. It was XKR Speed Pack, I think it was. And around this track, and we made a film. We had a dry ice machine that kind of hazed out so it could go through fog. And I did the most disgusting crunchy grade on it that was way too much. But it kind of had a like 2000s music video vibes to it.
Yeah.
And that was it. And that was kind of the first OEM thing. And it just sort of snowballed from there. I did a few launches, but I didn't really enjoy them. They paid well, but they're not really creative. You just turn up and shoot journalists, and it's not, you know, it's a good earner, but not something you want to carry on doing. It's like great. The people are great. It's so boring. And then just eventually you start filming more and more sort of bespoke pieces, and then I started directing a little bit on stuff, and then I started mostly getting asked to direct. I don't know if that means that I'm rubbish at filming stuff and actually I'm just better at shouting, don't know. But I've always enjoyed the directing side and the editing side a lot, I think, because I think they go hand in hand. I think it's virtually the same process, and I think that's where I sort of ended up now, is mostly directing, editing, and obviously in recent times now going into sort of CG and animation stuff as well. So yeah, that's been a huge shift.
Is that a sort of interesting disconnecting point where you go from doing everything? You turn up and you're like, I've got my camera, I'm deciding all the shots, I'm editing everything, I'm filming everything, I'm making sure everything's done, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, I can do all of those things. And then going, yeah, I'm just going to not just, but I'm going to decide what the shots are and put it all together, and you're going to film them.
Yeah, ultimately, I just got bored of standing around trying to load the luggage onto the aeroplane. It was because it's miserable. I was like, do you know what? If I just had a rucksack, this would be so much cooler.
Yeah. Much easier not to be carrying all the stuff. At that point, did you and do you sort of own a bunch of camera gear now, or do you hire a lot, or do you even own it and then sort of hire it out type of?
So I did have an absolute myriad of kit, as you can imagine. We tried to cover everything. So I had, 3 sort of big proper film cameras. I had a ton of lenses, load of car grip, and, gimbals. I had 2 drones, bits and pieces like that. And then I realized that it was getting harder and more annoying to do all of these, to carry all of these things, do all these things, and whilst trying to think creatively as well, and not just be sort of because I was starting to get in as sort of the peak bulk of gear that I had. Ironically, I was using it less and less because I kept having to sort of think more about what we're actually trying to make here, and trying to bookend films and stories, rather than sort of creating a cool montage of shots. And that was kind of the fundamental difference. Was I really enjoyed kind of shoot where you switch off and go I'm just gonna do some cool shots, and we can kind of glue it all together. And that was kind of what I enjoyed about the review stuff, was I could just I really had to only think about my in and out points for can I get these shots to glue together at the end, but not trying to think about a story arc or try and keep a shot style, all that kind of stuff. As I did more and more of that, I realized that I wasn't really that involved in the actual process of shooting it. And I was getting more and more involved in the standing around and asking other people to shoot the thing that I wanted. And I think that was that kind of there was no particular moment that there was no particular film where I did something. I always like to be hands-on. I still have a couple of cameras. I still love to shoot. I don't get to do it much at all anymore because of just the way that the career has changed. But the fact that also, taking a huge drone around was great to have it, but actually you had to get the license and the insurance and then the flying permissions in some places. I know some people bandit it and that's fine, but it just became too much of a stress, because the places we were being asked to go, they were saying oh, have you got your drone license? And I'm like, no. And you just kind of, and you just get the person who's a drone pilot. And I was like, oh, well, that's just a huge weight off my mind, because they're just going to do all the drone flying anyway.
It's their job.
Just let them do it. Yeah. Just you deal with their insurance, and you have to speak to air traffic control. I think it was at Goodwood where I was that was one of the first times. And then I ended up hiring a guy called Duncan, awesome guy. He was a drone pilot. He was fully certified, licensed, and he would fly around and I would do the camera DOP bit essentially. And then that kind of everything again, it's that gradual snowball, relentless effect where I was doing less and less, needing less and less, realizing that actually there are people who are much more involved in the kit. They're much more interested in the newest, latest stuff that looks the best, works the best. just wasn't that bothered. And I was getting more focused on the storyline, the editing, and the sort of the product itself, and then being able to learning how to translate my thoughts to someone and tell them, say like, right, I'd like you to shoot this like this with this in this way. And that was the difference. And I think that's quite nice for other people because they can switch their brain off because they'll get told what to shoot.
Yeah.
And it works both ways.
And they can nerd out about the technical aspects of this versus that versus this lens versus that versus you're like, I kind of need this shot.
I know what I want, just make sure it's either in or out of focus depending on what I asked you. And that was kind of it really. And it was never, I think that worked really well because really I had the edit. It was always the edit that I had in my head that I was working towards. And ultimately I could shoot it myself, but it was annoying because I was just going like, right, I need to actually then shoot this and this. And then you'd have like 3 people trying to shoot stuff. And we're all sort of trying to get a shot and not crash each other's angles and stuff. And I'm like, right, actually, if I don't shoot and I just tell you guys where to stand for this moment, we're actually going to get a better film out of this. And that was kind of the transition that ultimately happened. And it was definitely the right decision for me because it allowed me to elevate a little bit higher again and work on projects that I really wanted to work on. And it ended up going, it ended up, Bollywood car chased at one point when the directing got out of hand. And that was...
What was that like?
Bollywood really car fun. Chase? Yeah, well, we shot out in Finland or Norway. I want to say Finland, actually. Shot on a big ice lake, 2 Audi R8s having a gunfight, and then drifting through snow dunes, and then ultimately they'd chase each other down snow roads, and they ended up crashing through a church wall, and then having a big fight. And that was like a climactic sequence of a gigantic film called War. And I got to work with some unbelievably talented drivers, from, Frederick Asbo from Formula D was one of the drivers, and Frederick Sawley as well, who's another legend. I don't know if you've seen the meme of the blue car exiting the off-ramp, and there's a sign above it that goes, one goes this way and one goes the other way, and him skidding off. You'll recognize when you see it, but he's that car. He's driving that Cressida. And we've sort of got to know each other over the years, and he's a Russian armed driver, or sorry, a Ukraine driver, as it's now been reframed. Okay. An armed car, for the backstory to that very quickly, just for context, is the armed cars that you see on movie sets with a big jib arm on the front and the cameras. That, for most of its working life, was called a Russian arm.
Yes.
And it actually was invented in the Ukraine. So when the conflict and the war and invasion happened, that's why they decided that
rightfully renamed
in the Ukraine. So that's the reason for it. But yeah, old habits. And that was a wicked event, because the nice thing with Bollywood is they're still making 80s and 90s action movies just with modern tech. And there's unapologetic, fun, happy, like good stuff. It's all over the top and, very full of bravado and machismo, and it's brilliant fun. But also like the stunt sequence that we put together was really, really, it was legit. Like we were genuinely like running these cars so close to each other, 360 spins at sort of 70, 80 miles an hour on the ice. And then when they cut it all together, they ironically did so much CGI work on it that it almost made it look fake afterwards. We're like, no, this really happened. Like we really did this.
Like a newspaper.
Yeah. We're just like,
put the
VFX down. So, but that was really, really good fun. And that was kind of like why I love the directing side of it, because it's being such a car person, being able to kind of like work with people who are also really into cars, but being able to like bring a vision to life and go like, you can be slightly indulgent in sometimes and go like, I'd quite like to do this and kind of go, it's a fun aspect of it. And you just can't do everything. Like, and that's ultimately where it comes down to. You can't really, at least I can't. I haven't got the mental capacity to direct, shoot, and do all the things on set that you have to do to the level that I wanted to do. And there are other people who there are people who definitely can, but I'm not one of those people. So I had to kind of like drop one aspect. So I decided to drop the physical shooting side with the goal of being able to move on.
That totally makes sense. And coming from that time when you were like, I can shoot everything, I remember when I sort of first started doing a few videos and photos and whatever, and you're like, I only need the car for 4 minutes and I can make a video, a photo, and I'll give you all of my driving impressions. And then like you fast forward 10 years and you're like, yeah, that's the output of that is, one, it's just horrendous on your brain and you can't do it. So coming from that point, lots of people get into filming and they go in on like big crews.
Yeah.
And they look at small crews, like a one-person crew, and go, you're mental. Like, it's just impossible. And then I guess you're now coming sort of back, not as back, but where have you reached? Is there a middle, or you're just like, no, actually, we need 50 people now, or 100, or...
It depends very much on the project. So, like, on a CG project that would, you know, which, again, I know we'll get into this later, but like, it might be literally like 3 or 4 people for the entire project. I had done a shoot recently, which was like 8 people, which was lovely because it's live and moves fast, and there's no like big crew vans to move. You don't need a ton of people. You know, that was out in the USA, and that was kind of just small crew.
That's funny that 8 feels small now.
Oh yeah, I mean, like big shoots is like 120 people. It gets huge. We had you know, that's probably, I mean, 120 is about the biggest it gets. I don't even think Top Gear is that big. But it depends so much on what needs to be done in those times. You're not just, you know, usually when you have large crews, that's not effectively people who are always working throughout the day. It's not 120 camera people. You'll have, you know, if there's one big main camera, for example, that camera might have 3 people that's dedicated to just looking after that camera. There'll be a first, a second, a third AC, and basically the responsibilities drop down as they go down. But, you know, the first one person's making sure the camera works, the second person's making sure the camera's attached properly, and the third person's making sure that there's something in the camera to make it work.
Right. Okay,
and so, but like in the moment, a lot of people will stand around and do nothing for quite a lot of the day, but there will come a moment when you cut, suddenly everyone has to move.
Yeah.
And a large amount of things have to suddenly happen to keep the day rolling. And that's why you have like large crews. It's not for the sake of having people, and it's not a union thing or anything like that. It's purely like there is a moment to keep this day rolling, because you only perhaps get talent for, if you're shooting with an F1 person, for example, you'll get them for an hour to 3 hours tops. Sometimes we get lucky. We had like Max Verstappen for a whole day, but that happens extremely rarely. But when you need something to happen, you've got a lot of things that need to move instantly.
They have to happen then correctly.
There and then, and everyone needs to be briefed. So there's one person controlling a small group, and, you know, if the lighting things have to change, or you've got to do a location move, you know, you've got so much stuff and people and things that have to move effectively. You've got to have people waiting at the other end to make sure there's parking spaces outside something if you're moving to a location. It's like, I can go, you know, there's so much when you start to break it down. And then all of a sudden you've got to then feed 120 people, or you might have to, you know, hotel 120 people. Like it's where it suddenly gets massive without, you know, you go, that's unnecessary. It's like, well, sometimes it is necessary, because it depends what the factors are. I don't like large crews. I don't think anyone likes large crews, because you don't really meet anyone. You don't really work with everyone closely on the set.
Yeah.
There's always 50% of the people, and I'm like, hey mate, would you move that for us? And you're like, I never really remember their names, and you're like, you feel really bad. And I'm like, oh, you'll be checking a call sheet going like, oh, what's the gaffer called again? And you're like, Steve, yeah, you know. So that happens quite a lot. But the small crews are so much more fun because it's so much more personal, and I think there's a better vibe. You know, you feel like you're having fun and it's creative, rather than everyone's sort of like quite detached from the process. You know, if you're on a large shoot, a lot of people don't even know what the hell you're shooting, you know. And so at the start of each day, I try and do a little briefing and try and explain the story of what's generally happening to the whole crew. So at least everyone's kind of going, oh, I kind of get the vibe of what's going on. And that apparently doesn't happen very often, which I find bizarre. They'll have a briefing, but the director won't tell them what's actually the point of the film. So everyone's going like, why am I fitting this camera to this? Why am I putting this on here? You know, why are we painting this? Like, no one really understands it. They're just doing the job and they're not into it. So I feel that's a big part of it. And that's an element of the directing that I think I've learned from doing everything and wanting to know a little bit more.
And presumably that has a huge trickle down effect of like, if everyone knows like kind of why you're there, the input they have on that final thing, which might be tiny, they might be like, oh, I know we're about to do this, but I don't think that's not the right solution.
Yeah.
For what you want.
Totally. And people know, especially on car shoots, people who are car people on car shoots get what needs to be done better. It's why with a smaller crew, you can be more focused and use people that you know are car people. Like on a car shoot, we talk about, after every single take, a car gets washed. Every single take, someone goes over with a duster, a glass cleaner or something, and give it a quick check, because you just know that the next take that we're going to do, there'll be a blob of dust or a leaf or something that's in the grill that you can't have, and like it just takes someone a second on a commercial to take it out. Or we go to retouching, it takes someone like 2 or 3 hours to just paint out this leaf, that just, and that's the sort of stuff. So you have people on set who are doing things to keep the ball rolling. It's it's not, crew size almost becomes irrelevant. It's days. You're trying to reduce days because you don't have the time, and deadlines are getting tighter, and you have to produce more per day. You have to kind of have like one person making sure that everything's 916 compatible, as we were saying earlier. Just one person is just watching a monitor, just making sure that everything's 916, because they know that if it falls out of it, that might be, on a drama shoot, that might be a continuity person or something like that. But there's someone doing that. And because I'm not paying attention to that really, I'm just looking at the overall thing and making sure. Sometimes I'm not even looking at the shots. I'm just trying to make sure the party still carries on, because like some days we did a Honda shoot very recently. It was brutal. Like it was like 3 a.m. start, and we didn't finish until like 10:30 or something like that in the evening. The crew was destroyed, and we were just trying to like keep spirits high, but there was no time for an extra day. So just the way the schedule landed, so we couldn't. Everyone was exhausted. You're just trying to keep done. Yeah. So as director, you then become the person who's actually trying to keep the level of energy up on the set, and you have to be the energy person that people feed off, and you've got to be bright and happy and still like enthusiastic about it, because everyone follows you, and if you drop off the cliff, everyone else does. Anyone who's grumpy in the product suffers as a result.
Yeah. Are most car media stuff that's produced these days, is most of that produced by people that are into cars? I seem to have interfaced with quite a few shoots where maybe someone is, but like a lot of the people involved aren't, and you're like, my brain just goes, all right, but you don't get it. You just like, the reason your angles are shit is you don't get it.
This is unfortunately the case. A couple of examples that spring to mind were, I've done a couple of shoots where we've worked with some phenomenally talented DOPs who have shot some of the most legendary fashion commercials, and, they've done big, multi-million pound campaigns and stuff. And they haven't really shot cars in a beauty sense. And they'll suddenly just like point a light at a car, and it's suddenly pinging and reflective, and you're like, brother, just stop it. It's like there's a whole way of lighting a car that you have to do, otherwise it's just horrible. And it's the same thing as shooting people. Like, I'm not very good at shooting people, but I know how to light and shoot a car. And that is something which I've found that if they're not car people straight away, they're thinking in the wrong space instantly. When you say like we need to kind of like highlight a wheel, they'll just put a spotlight on it, and you're like, no, that looks horrific. We need to find a way of reflecting the light back onto the car softly, and this will always be the thing. But so what I have found on some shoots, so this is the same thing with directors. Actually, I've consulted on some commercials alongside other directors. We did it was a big Maserati, I think it was MC20 launch film, where I was a consultant director working with an unbelievably talented set of pair of directors who were music video specialists, incredible aesthetic and like an absolutely like insane vision. Just it's so cool. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. But they hadn't worked with cars before, so they didn't know really how to shoot a car. So rather than sort of go like, well, we'll figure it out, I can just come in for 48 hours, help through that bit, and just essentially act as a second unit director, essentially, and then jump back out again. And I think that's, if I hadn't gone into the CG route during COVID, I would have really tried to push into more second unit stuff on films, because the second unit, you have on a big film, you have a first unit, which is your actors, the main stuff that happens on stage. It's probably like 80% of what you see on film. The cool sequences that are created is the second unit director.
Okay.
The second unit director is the guy who controls all the action. So in your Fast and Furious films, purely as an example, the first unit director probably isn't even present on set during the drift scenes and the car chases. Unless it's the CG at performance part of it, because that's not relevant. It's the second unit director.
That is my jam.
That is my jam. Make the cars look cool, make them look beautiful, make them look fast, loud, whatever. It's my whole, that's what I love. And it's kind of comes from my love of driving and all that kind of stuff. So that's the element I would have always liked to have steered into had life worked out slightly differently. But that is the job that you have to be car people. The stunt people are, they're proper car people. The good ones are. There are astonishingly still some guys in the stunt register who don't really like cars. But that is a hangover from the stunt register days when you had to have 3 disciplines. I think you had to so most people like fighting because that's really popular, maybe falling because that's really helpful, and good pay for falling, and then cars because cars is fun, right? So you have a lot of guys who are not really actually very naturally talented drivers doing stunt driving, but they can roll a car over because you just drive at a pipe and it falls over. I'm slightly downplaying the ease of this, but within the scope of what we're talking about, this is however, when you put someone in a car who is an absolutely God's talented, gifted driver, and they can drift a car over a penny, an inch from the camera, and do 6 or 7 takes perfectly every time, that's who you actually want driving your cars on these films. And I think the industry's really starting to pick that up and learn that. And there's lots of guys who just have really good car control and bike control, and they are getting, rightly so, the good driving stunt work now. And as a result, I think you can see the lift in quality of drivers in car chases, and you see it over all of these films. Mark Higgins, one of the greatest UK stunt drivers of all time, rally driver, famous for his Isle of Man World Subaru records and stuff like that. But he's an unbelievably talented driver. And you see it. You see that control in all the Bond films. You don't see cars, in old Hollywood shows and films, you used to see a car doing this massive Larry skid, and then it would just about spin out, but they'd cut just before you see. But you're like watching that shot going like, they span that car. They span that freaking car. And that's the difference, I think, that really kind of makes the difference when you've got real car people on set. You produce real, authentic car people stuff. And I think that energy comes across, going back to the original point of this whole thing, is that by having lots of car people on set who love cars, know what makes a car work, that is what creates longevity and between car people. And you always see it in internet comments. Like, I think the internet is the greatest review. The internet comment section on YouTube is the greatest review, like, that's real that you can possibly have, because there's no one cares what they write, as they'll write what they're thinking. So if you've got generally good things to say about what's being put up there, not knowing who has made it, or the other way around, you don't know who's making those comments, that's really good, because you see that and it reflects hopefully well on your work, that you go, yeah, this was sick. And whereas you see really like contrived stuff that's like, oh my God, this was so sped up, this looked rubbish, this was like the weakest thing, like why have they put a V10 engine over a V6? And like, looking at you, BMW. And that was a V8, wasn't it? Yeah, they put a Lamborghini V10 sound over a V8. And like stuff like that, the internet will destroy you for that. But no one... That's why you get hired, is because you're the car guy. And as long as you can then have, your car guy nerdiness and like hyper focus on random niche details, but understand the brand qualities and the brand values and elevate that into like a high-end commercial for multimillionaires to go and be happy that they bought their Bugatti. That, I believe, is where the uniqueness of hopefully what I do and people like me do.
What is the most outrageous bit of driving you've seen on a set where you're just like, geez, that guy? Or even if it's just the repeating of the same obscene maneuver.
There's a stunt driver called Mauro in the UK, Mauro Callo. He's an absolute legend. That man can throw a car into the most perfect position every single time, because he's just, you need that reliability. When you are asking someone to drive a camera car and doing one of these, it's called a joust, where you drive a car at a moving camera car and you have to cross paths at the right moment. That requires extreme car control. And it's not just like wobbling the car through the corner and adjusting, because if you want to actually get a truly gnarly shot, you want to have a long lens that doesn't allow for a lot of movement. So you want to, and then the focus puller needs to be, because you're not going to, you've got a focus puller who's trying to like decipher, is he close or are we zoomed in? Like, because he has to make that decision. So consistency is incredibly key. Mauro, I think, is probably one of the best in the business for just placing a car on a penny. But then, you sometimes we did a shoot with Andy Wallace, who is, I don't think even he would mind me saying, Andy is now, getting on a bit, but 7 times Le Mans champion, and at his age still doing 270, 300 miles an hour in cars, and he will hold it perfectly. And if we need to do a flyby past a car, we asked him to do a flyby on a track in Papenburg last year, and I think he was doing like 280 miles an hour past us, and we were doing like 70. And he has to hold the car, because as you go past the car, we get virtually blown out of the lane, but also so does he. And he has to hold that thing and be perfect. I mean, that car was so fast and pushes so much air. He could feel the bridge as he goes under the bridge in the car. Like that. So that's the kind of physics stuff which those true professionals bring. And it looks so easy on camera. I think it's like anyone who does anything really well, they make it look so easy breezy. And, that's the level that I can only wish to drive to. Yeah.
Whilst we're on driving fast and whatever, I feel like we have to sort of loosely cover this video that you were involved with a while ago now. The was it 0 to 400 to 0?
Yeah.
Chiron? Was it Chiron video?
Yep, that's right. Yep. We did this was an idea. This was an idea that came out of being car people. And it was the last launch I ever did was the Bugatti Chiron launch. So I hadn't done launches for a while, but I'd been I knew the people at Bugatti a little bit. We'd been doing some stuff. I'd ended up doing a film for Drive Tribe, it was in the end, actually, if you remember that. And when that was still the original, was it Drive Tribe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or was that?
It was. Anyway,
it was for, no.
I think it was Drive Tribe, but yeah, it was Drive Tribe. But before it became what it is, what it became now. And we did first Chiron, and then I ended up going on the launch to kind of help. And it was like a quiet period of work. So I was like, yeah, I'll do that. And we were driving back into Lisbon. It was in Portugal, and we were on the freeways. It was like Sunday morning. Andy Wallace is in the car, and he was just he said, like, we were just talking about the car itself and like how insane the car was, because I'm not trying to sound like a Bugatti fanboy here, but these things are like, I always try and say it's like a 911 Turbo SSSSSSS. It's like unfathomably usable performance, but ridiculously fast and insanely reliable and well made. And not to put down anyone other hypercars, but there is a certain thing that Bugatti does extremely well. And he was on the motorway, and we just like driving along, and he says, well, if you just put your foot down, and then he just put his foot down, and this car reached an indescribably stupid speed in a tiny space of time on this completely empty, like it's nothing in the morning outside Lisbon. And I was like, that sort of gave us an idea. We're like, well, look, what if because, we had another car following. And I was like, I was trying to film that on the phone vertically, obviously. And I thought, like, what if we did this actually at the top speed? Because we have errorless Seine. Well, they did before Bugatti got bought, but they had errorless Seine. We had the longest flat straight in the world. Yeah. What would that look like car to car? And he was like, that's a really silly idea because they'll push each other out of the lane and stuff. And he's completely right. That's exactly what they do. But when we're like, yeah, but what if we tried anyway? And I know that Andy wasn't unfortunately available for the shoot because I think he was actually racing for the time. But we got in Juan Pablo Montoya to do it instead.
Nice. So
we turn up at Errolá Seine, this huge long track. And for those who don't know, it's an oval track, massive long thing with a enormously long straight, but the straight is so flat, it's physically cut into the earth. It's not laid over it. It is flat. So the middle is higher, the banks are higher than the ends because the earth is a circle or a sphere. Yeah. So like it's subtle, but it's quite a weird, important detail. That's how extreme this place is. The two, we got the Chiron out there. We did the run. It smashes the record without even trying. It was smashed a couple of days later by Koenigsegg, but the Koenigsegg is a different kettle of fish.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, did the record, did it multiple times. It was so easy that Juan Pablo didn't even need to wear a suit or helmet. Because when we were chatting about the film, we're like, well, what does he need? Does he need to wear a race suit? And the Bugatti engineers are like, why? And I go, well, he's going really fast, isn't he? And they're like, yeah, it's designed to do that. And then suddenly you realize it's such an amazing attitude because they were like, well, yeah, I mean, it's not like we're doing it at Fiesta. It's like, yeah, just supposed to, it's not even a speed limiter at that speed at 267 miles an hour. So anyway, it's mental. So they, obviously with all the safety checks, they're checking tires, swapping wheels and stuff like that to make sure that everything is safe, just from a due diligence perspective. But it was fine. There was no issues whatsoever. The car to car bit, we attached the camera to the back of a car, launched the two cars at exactly the same time, and they both follow each other up to 267 miles an hour, where Juan Pablo's car continues on past us, probably at like 275 onto like 280. And that was the shot. Everything was built around this whole shot. That was the whole concept. And I'm very happy to say that it worked really, really well. The fun part was what the internet then tried to decipher from it, because someone found a photo of the back of a Toyota Supra, an old Mark IV Supra, with a camera on the back of it. And they were like, oh, that's how they filmed it. And instantly it became this was filmed by a 1,000 horsepower Supra. And I think it sort of became internet lore that how do you film a Bugatti with a 1,000 horsepower Supra? And honestly, this was the constant narrative. And it was awesome because it kind of pushed it out so far into the outer reaches of car culture. Because obviously most people haven't got any interest in a Bugatti Chiron if they're kind of the Supra people. People tend to be quite narrow-minded in that respect. But yeah, it just became a whole thing. And we're like...
It was like a whole meme.
Yeah.
And then I remember photos of an Agera RS, which I think broke the record a minute. And they were like, with like a sort of rig on it. And they were like, well, obviously that's how they filmed it.
That's how they filmed it, yeah. And it was a wild thinking. We were thinking like, how do we tell everybody that we just use another one? Because no one thought like, Bugatti surely have more than one Chiron.
Yeah.
And like we had three. Like one of them was just used for like miking up the sound, and we just sent them off shooting. Like honestly, we ended up using 3 Chirons because it rained halfway through the shoot, just to pick spray off the ground. Like it was the bougiest shoot I've ever done.
That's cool.
But the other really like cool thing that sort of like being really nice to kind of see over time is like it still gets millions of views at the moment. I think I checked it just yesterday when I was sending links across that we've crossed 100 million views on YouTube, which is organic and insane, because that puts it at the highest. Well, it's been there for quite a while, but it's the highest viewed automotive
video ever. Yeah,
and definitely the highest viewed commercial. There is a higher viewed commercial but it's Jean-Claude Van Damme doing splits with the Volvo trucks, but they've put it under entertainment, not automotive.
Okay.
So legally,
technicality,
yeah, and it's not a car. But that is, and deservedly so, because that also slapped. But yeah, no, we do have that. We can claim that quite legitimately, that it's the highest viewed piece of automotive content, single piece, which is bananas, and doesn't include the internet versions of that, like the Instagrams and your TikToks and stuff that have also followed it. So that was really special, and we kind of realized that, you know, Bugatti, that genuinely helped bring Bugatti up. I mean, it gained like hundreds of thousands of followers from that video, and it really kind of helped lift them out of sort of being this kind of like almost like an unobtainium watch thing to a brand that's like, whoa, they do really cool stuff. Because obviously there were other brands there were other videos that they had made with Top Gear. Obviously the race was really popular, and they did speed runs and stuff, but they were sort of came from exterior places. It was the first time that something that Bugatti had put out that was like really showed like real what it could do, but it was done in a way, and it was like, hopefully beautiful enough and entertaining enough. And so then that sort of unlocked a level of confidence with Bugatti to go and do other stuff. And we ended up making a drift film with them and a few other bits and pieces, and just realizing that just occasionally, if you just drop a little nuclear bomb of cool content, it really, really lands hard. And that makes a big, big difference. So I don't think I'll ever see the likes of being able to repeat that sort of success. There's just no, I mean, I don't know how it can. But it's really cool that was something it was such a genuine film made by car people who love cars, and Bugatti, the people, you know, the PR team, Mary Louise at the time, she was a huge car person. She just loves speed and cars, and she was instrumental in organizing that. And then you have the vision from everyone else who was on set who can make it happen. So you need the people, like car people drive emotion. And I know that cars these days, people worry that they're becoming like emotionless husks. And I do think there's a lot of like marketing teams that, I mean, BMW, I don't know what happened a couple of years ago. I don't know where that came from, because that felt such a left turn from their, like, we make the best drivers cars. We adore driving, and people still adore driving. And then they were just like, nah, if you love driving, you're weird. And like, here's some, and just, they were so brutal about it. And I think that landed on its face so hard.
I don't know why brands do that. Just like, we've had a few brands just like torch everything.
Yeah. It's mental. It's
insane. Kind of like you guys.
Yeah. Like, sometimes you like, and you want to have like an intervention, sit down and like, right, are you okay? What are you doing? Like, you can't, like, I know that it's your brand, but like, we're the investors in the brand. And like, we are the people that drive everything. Like and the court of public opinion is generally the right one, unfortunately, when it comes to this kind of stuff. And like, you know, sometimes you look at stuff with such I really hate the excuse of, well, you're talking about it, aren't you? Like, that drives me mental, because that is not a reason to be proud of it. If that is the reason, I think it was like, was it Ricky Gervais who said like, oh, if you want to go and be famous, go and shoot someone.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, exactly.
Like if that's what you want to be, if you just want to be famous, like, why don't you be famous for the right thing, and
do
make your brand good for so like with your brand, like, make your brand cool for the good reasons. Like Jaguar, I'm not going to beat on Jaguar, but for a while back in the day, we were shooting quite a lot of the villains commercials. Like,
really cool.
Yeah. And Jaguar's struggled with its voice for quite a long time. And that was a moment that suddenly everyone remembers that era. I think it was Piggy Lines who sort of came up with the whole thing. And he was like, this is cool. It was just a cool thing, and it was identifiable, and it sort of played into what British, I know it's a bit old hat, but it's what people loved about the cars. They were cool. They were, you know, like a bit gangster, a little bit tongue in cheek, like, and like a product that people were like, it's a Jag. It's pretty cool. It's got a Jag, you know, and that sort of set you up as the person that you were projecting to be. Perhaps, I don't know. Maybe, I don't know what happened there, but again, and we all remember that. And like BMW were responsible for some of the greatest adverts of all time with the Star film with Madonna, and you know, the Guy Ritchie version with the M39 M5 and that series of whole films. I think they call The Heist. And if people haven't seen these films, go and type it into YouTube. Go and watch. Just type in BMW M5 Madonna Guy Ritchie, and you will be treated to 6 minutes of just the most exquisite, like, out of pocket car chase, driving, everything. And there's a whole series of them. There's one with Don Cheadle that's amazing. There's loads. I mean, they're pure. I mean, the Jerry Bruckheimer did one. Like, it's huge, like, people and teams and crews that did them. They spent a fortune on it. And they're so ingrained in my brain as like, this was content that stood not only the test of time, but made me instantly want an M5. And it played to the strengths of what people loved about the cars. And those were definitely instrumental in like me wanting to get into filmmaking more.
And they stick, don't they? You remember those adverts or whatever. And as long as the brand doesn't do something to like reverse that.
Yeah.
Then that just there in the back of your head going, oh, they are kind of cool. They're kind of cool. I'm not there, you know, whatever reason I've not engaged with it or blah, 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 but like they did that. That's fun. Therefore.
And the trickle down effect, you don't even have to watch an M5. The trickle down effect is BMW made some badass stuff and it's cool. And I don't think anyone could have watched it and been offended. But I think now, like I've had 3 car commercials that we've made banned over the years for breaking what they call the advertising, the ASA laws and stuff like that. And they're usually things like, it's usually glorifying speed and glorifying dangerous driving.
Oh, right.
And so, and we're not talking about people doing donuts in a street. I'm talking about, there was one film we did where a Jag crossed a white line and that was it. Just crossed a white line. So to stop that now, if we do an overtake on a particularly aesthetic bit of road and there's a white line in the middle, a solid white line, we have to digitally remove the white line because the shot, if it's beautiful and the light's right, we can't change the road.
Can't redo it somewhere else.
So we get rid of the white line in post, and then sometimes you have to get rid of the reflection in the car, as you can imagine as well. So if it's a black car and there's suddenly a white line reflected in the car, but it's not on the road, that's weird. So it's a whole heap of stuff that happens.
I sort of like, I get it, but also, it's tricky, isn't it? But then what? They don't do it in films though.
No, because fantasy. But you can't have fantasy if it's
because it's not real.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Like, I was helping a friend out, George Howson from Petroleum, who was shooting for RM Auctions, Ferrari Testarossa convertible, like the proper outrun Ferrari, the real thing. And I think it was an ex-Bahrain car, sort of royalty thing. We shot this film at RAF Bentwaters, around the perimeter roads, and it's a girl who goes into a daydream watching someone play the original arcade game. It then cuts to the arcade machine in the frickin' jungle, like it's like clearly fantasy, and then they've got the Testarossa ripping through traffic, having a great day, and you're like, well, that's the coolest thing. And at one point, you know, she sort of does the thing that they do in a computer game where the blonde girl waves her hand out and she's sort of like getting up and excited and stuff, you know, and it goes like, great drift. And and then it cuts back to out of her eyes, so clearly out of the daydream, where they're back in the bar watching the guys play Outrun. I think it went on the internet for about 7 days before it got banned for promoting dangerous driving, and because we were like into driving into oncoming traffic and then not wearing a seatbelt. And we're like, this is clearly fantasy, like so clearly like projected as fantasy. There's like even the misty like wobble, you know, short of having like the little harpy sound that goes, and then it cuts back to reality where nothing interesting is happening, and it was so clearly fantasy, and yet it still fell under the same rules. And that was a YouTube video just for advertising a car that's coming up for sale soon, and it has had to be wiped from the internet. There is a couple of versions of it that just exist from third-party accounts that they had no control over, but it's gone. And that was a really cool film. It was fun. It was nice. There was disclaimers on it as well. Like there were disclaimers saying that, don't do this.
Professional driver, cloud course,
all
whatever.
That stuff. Yeah, we do it all the time. But like that was the power of the ASA, someone wanting to take all the fun out of cars. And as a result, I mean, you look at, I don't know if you've seen like a Peugeot 205 GTI advert from the 80s. It is mental. They are jumping these things through walls. There are Saab adverts where they're like doing like, they're like flipping them over and doing handbrake turns. There is a whole era of driving adverts where the cars were just doing the most outrageous things, like a handbrake turn and like pulling up to a stop, because it was exciting and fun. And we can't do a single part of that anymore. And I can clinically go through. It is so lame, which partly made the CGI thing feel quite appealing, is that you can kind of do whatever you want to do. And then as it sort of progressed, as it's progressed and we've become more closer to photorealism, the more scrutiny it falls under. And because we are ostensibly trying to recreate real films, and that's the problem. If it looks real, it's then treated as real. So we then have to still adhere to the road laws in our CGI film, in our fantasy worlds, in make-believe places. And that is quite depressing. And they're about to take away all my engines. Like, I can't have engines in the film soon. Like, it's all of that. It's like, all that kind of stuff is becoming quite difficult to challenge. That's why these brands like that I do work with, like McLaren and those guys, they're kind of still championing the proper ICE engine and still making noise, and long may that continue as long as they possibly can. Yeah.
Well, I'm slightly conscious of time, so we've got to get a few things through before we hit the limiter. So you started making, I think the sort of Bugatti film is an interesting sort of transition point. Like, you started working in CGI, and you now make stuff in CGI and like, I guess, blend the two as well.
Yep.
What sort of spurred that, and I guess what do you really enjoy about it, and what can you now do, sort of thing?
So it came out of COVID. COVID and Brexit really were the two main triggers that triggered this. So when both of those things sort of simultaneously happened at approximately the same period of time, the entire industry the whole film industry in terms of the UK went into this slight panic mode. From the Brexit side of it, suddenly people suddenly kept hold of their cash. They didn't want to do big spends because they're like, right, what's going on? The economy suddenly just did a huge wobble up and down, and people weren't sure what to do. Suddenly, like, questions over like exports and how we work and all that. So that really kind of put a kibosh on stuff. And even with like losing the privileges to be able to work in Europe for the amount of time that I was working in Europe as well, like, we've lost that. Having the Carnet cameras, and I'm not being funny, but you take across a £10 million prototype car, you put a Carnet on that, and you have spent more than the budget of the entire film. And like, that is the problem that has happened. So that really, really made things very, very difficult for us from a filming perspective to just go out and just shoot a nice little film somewhere. Prices started increasing just generally in the world anyway, so it just compounded the effect into that. So that was a big problem. And then, so what I was finding was there was less and less working abroad doing shoots on roads, and it became more sort of UK studio shoots and bits and pieces like that, which is kind of fine, but really, I love cars moving.
Yeah.
And then COVID hit, spectacular timing, and that essentially stopped the industry for a year, like literally shut it completely down. Everyone was doing it. So, if you recall that people on, not that I ever watched a single episode of it, but apparently people on EastEnders were having to sort of do shoots through glass, and everyone was separated on set. They were keeping people in bubbles. You had to travel on a coach and stay in a hotel, and there was so much stuff. But for us who just need to dip in and dip out of jobs, it was virtually impossible to go and film something. And the tap switched off pretty much overnight. It's come back now, but yeah, at that time it was a big panic because no one knew how long this was going to last, what was going on. At the time as well, I was becoming aware that the CGI stuff was getting quite good, and I thought it'd be quite good to take this time off to learn a little bit more and sort of know your enemy a bit better. And a good friend of mine, Kaisel, or people know on the internet as the Kaiser, he was very instrumental in kind of showing me that you can just be creative from your bedroom at home, basically, and the worlds you can make. And I thought, well, actually, like, if I can make films at home that are half passable, what would that look like? So we started doing that. We started watching some tutorials on the internet, started to kind of like figure some bits and pieces out. And then a competition happened online with a VFX channel that I did watch. And they were like, oh, why don't you make a vehicle animation? Because funnily enough, when you're sort of trying to learn stuff, it's actually quite like hard to make something because you don't really know what to make. But all of a sudden I had a purpose. I had like, oh, someone is directing me. I now know what I need to make. So I started working on this animation of a yellow NSX flying through like a Fifth Element feel kind of floating car thing. And out of the 2,500 people that entered, they did a top 100 montage, and I got into the top 100 with that. So I'd only been sort of doing VFX for a few months, literally like 3 months at that point. So that was a big boost to going like, oh, this is cool. And that was, it actually was a really big kind of like feeling like I could do something with this. Mm. And then again, as with all of these things, it took someone from an agency to have a little bit of faith in me to go, could you try doing this with this? And it was a McLaren project. It was 750S, I think. There wasn't a car available for real life. And that was, they were like, we just need to show the car moving, but there isn't a working car. And I just thought, well, with what I've learned from my process, I can make a car move. We can do that. And then
I can make it fly.
I can do whatever you want. And we suddenly realized that we created the commercial. So the McLaren 750S launch film is a full CGI launch film that we sort of put together. Myself, my two business partners, Kaisel and Lukasz, we put that together. My directing and my animation, translating kind of directly onto the screen, because the nice thing with the program I use, which is Unreal Engine, is you are literally controlling a camera just like a real one. The car moves just like a real one. You have to animate everything by hand, but if you know how the real car should move and you know how the real cameras should move, that does 95% of the work. Because in the same way that Toy Story isn't real, but you buy into it because of the way that the cameras feel grounded and the puppets have weight, the toys have you feel like there's the way that they move within the realms of that is realistic. Yeah. Same with the cars. If you can kind of convey the weight, the speed, the camera movement, the shutter speed, the vibration in the camera and all that kind of stuff, that is what worked really, really well, I think, for us, because that comes from the years of shooting real cars. And then it sort of falls back to the fact that you are now suddenly in control of everything again. It's going back to almost a self-shooter. It's the whole circle, goes all the way around. So I am now editing it. You're thinking about where you're shooting and you create those roads, although we get people to create those for us now. The edit happens entirely under your auspice. The light is your, do you want to keep the sun at just daybreak, the entire shoot? No problem. So that's really nice.
Perfect.
Yeah. There's never any weather issues. Like if we want weather issues, we just put them in. And it's genuinely like art. So you are truly, what you are making is when people look at it and critique it, you are responsible for every single thing on that screen. Sound design, everything, everything that happens, you have had physical control over. It's not like you can blame the pro driver for not being good enough to get the car past the camera. You can't blame the focus puller because there is no focus puller. You are programming every element of it. And it's quite intuitive, actually, once you understand what it's doing. It's very overwhelming. It did take me a good year and a half to really kind of get my head round a lot of it. And every day is still a school day, and technology is always moving. But it is true CGI. There's no AI involved. It's all real. You make everything that happens on the screen. The AI that's the only thing that we're sort of battling with is people kind of mixing it up, going like, oh, you just type it into a computer and
you just put in a prompt.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that is not how that works, and it's going to be a long time before that is actually how it works as well, because that is just physically just not possible yet. It is. I'm sure at one point, and I can understand the process of how that will probably happen at some point. But for now, there's the subtle art direction. It's the subtle way that the car drives, the drifts, the little shakes here. You can't program that into AI. You just have to hope that whatever AI mess comes out is about right. But if I was to type in McLaren 750S driving on road, it must look roughly like this. It'll go, cool, here is something that resembles a 750S, sort of moving, but it's got the wrong number of spokes, the grille has changed shape, headlights haven't got the same number of things in it. It might look nice on a tiny phone for a few seconds, but you can't create a stable 60-second advert out of it.
Yeah.
Well, one day we will, though.
Yeah. And are you going through that process again of like starting small and then being like, well, actually now I kind of want to direct it a bit more. So can you do the shading on this section? Can you animate the camera movements and I'll tweak them?
That's exactly what's happening. We are working with really talented artists who do a lot of the prep work on the stuff. The location team, the people we sort of say we want to build this world. So, we're building Glencoe currently in full 3D, and they're taking the real topology from Google Maps and from scans of the Earth, and they said that the mountains are perfect. They're then spending all their time hand painting in the rocks, the moss, the gorse, thistle, and all that kind of stuff. That is a really skilled artist team spending a long time working on that, and that's one of those things that I haven't got the time to do that because we've got a few other bits pieces, and I let those people who are really good at that make that. And then I sort of can jump in at the end, frame the cameras, direct it, sort of animate what I want to do. Then I kind of hand it back over and go, right, off you go, finish it. And that it's sort of, I think by being involved in the process, trying to learn the CGI throughout from the start, in the same way that you learn the filming stuff, you become familiar with all the steps of the process and the limitations and what you can expect them to do. And one of the things that I was told when I first started making them is that the thing that made a difference with the stuff I was making was people could tell that I was a car nerd on top of it. So you have these unbelievably talented artists who can create these photorealistic, incredible shots, but they actually don't really know how a car moves. Their references from films are wrong because people in those films they're from films. So, I can, from following cars around racetracks, from standing next to driving cars, I know the weirdness. I know when something's not quite right, and I can't describe it other than go, that's not quite right. And that's the difference, hopefully, is where you weaponize everyone's skill set. So you take their amazing talent to create the image and get the physical environments and the models looking as photorealistic as possible. Then I come in and dabble around and do my little bit, and then I hand it back over whilst the other talented people make the next part. It's an amazing process. It's incredibly collaborative, and it means you're not limited also by people just in the UK. I work with people all around the world. So it's an incredibly cross-global process and makes the world feel delightfully small sometimes, but it truly is like, you're no longer limited by, can we get that person to set? It doesn't matter. They don't even have to be on the same time zone. We just all work in this kind of environment, and it's fantastic. It's a really enjoyable process, but I still try to break out and do some real films every now and then. I still don't want to lose real. And
Yeah.
the CGI stuff is good because we're filling holes at the moment because prototypes are hard to build. Inevitably, turnaround times are incredibly short. And again, as we said at the start, the amount of deliverables required on these films is insane. You know, you might get 80 versions of the same commercial that has to be made.
Whoa.
So if you can imagine all those formats that has to be pushed out, you know, that just makes sense in CGI because I can just go back into that shot, redo that frame. A few hours later, another shot pops out and it's correct. So it's for manufacturers, it takes a lot of the risk away. They know that they'll get good weather. They know that they'll get the car that they need to get in the environment they want.
No one's going to see it.
Yeah, exactly. No one's going to, there's no embargo issues. There's no transport issues. There's no carne issues. And ultimately, as long as it remains a commercial and not trying to pass itself off as a like editorial content, people are quite comfortable with CGI now. We've sort of got over that bit like, ugh, CGI. Now it's kind of like, they don't even think about it. As long as the basics are right, that's fine.
And do you think because of that, because it's like of the sort of commercial aspect side of it, it's almost like that's the perfect place-ish to make that stuff. Whereas then in the real world, you kind of want to make like real things.
Yeah, definitely.
Like real stories, real people, that sort of stuff.
100%. And that's, you know, the humanity and like, it's why, you know, why a lot of people go to car shows. It's not really for the cars. It's the social aspect as well. And I think, you know, human stories around cars, you know, you can have, it's the universal language, isn't it? That kind of holds completely different classes of people together from all sorts of walks of life. And we can still have a commonality. The guy who's got his 250 Testarossa worth millions of pounds will then be able to look at a MX-5, Mark 1 MX-5 that's in great condition that's probably worth about $5,000, and they'll go like, that's awesome. I used to have one of those. They can chat, they can talk, and there's an immediate thing. And so I think, you know, we're producing stuff that basically shows brand values and core, you know, the core performance of cars that the manufacturer want to show, and just go like, here's a cool thing that our car can do. Please buy one. Whereas in real life, you want to see what is the person, what is the moment, what is the situation that car creates without being contrived. It's the real use. And I think that real story thing will always be, the reality will always override like a contrived narrative.
Yeah. It's almost like I was watching some of the stuff about this recently, but like a documentary now is just better than all else, almost. Like it will last, documentaries last forever. Films, like, yes, no, maybe, who knows? But it's like you're telling a real story of real people about a thing that like really happened.
Oh yeah, and weirdly, I think some documentaries are rewatchable. I mean, I've rewatched like the Fire Festival documentary like 3 times. Like, and like I know what's going to happen. There's no voyage of discovery anymore. Like, but you know, and it's I love that. I love that stuff. You know, one of the first sort of big films that we ever did off our own back was we went to Japan and shot a drift documentary called Outsiders, and we sold like a ton of Blu-ray and DVDs from it and stuff before we ended up putting it out on the internet a few years later.
It's done like 5 million views on the channel on Driftworks.
Yeah. Outsiders was it's and that was never really supposed to be a documentary. I was going out to just film it and document it, but when we got home, we're like, oh, I could edit this a little bit better, you know. And it's still very janky and it's very old and it's very amateurish, but the core structure of the film, you know, lasts. And I still get to this day, even this week, I had people asking when the second one's come out, or that I met someone at the weekend who said, you know, Outsiders got me into drifting, and they still watch it to this day. And it's kind of one of those odd things that whilst there is nothing to be learned from watching it again, there was clearly something that resonates either like as just an emotional thing, or whether it was just because it's, again, I didn't know as much as I know now in terms of the technical side of it, and also just in terms of the actual drifting side of it. Like there were lots of people there that we met that I knew of them, and I didn't really know like how significant what I was doing really was. and it was just the right time, right place.
Yeah.
And I love that so much. And then many years later, we got to the privilege of filming with Sterling Moss back in, I think it was 2012, 2013. He was still healthy. He had fallen down his lift shaft, but as is Sterling's way, he just got back up again and cracked on. And we got to spend some time with him and a legendary test driver called Norman Dewis, and we captured a couple of incredibly unique, special moments with the two guys. Unfortunately, that project essentially got shelved until Sterling died. He died on his Easter Day. He died, didn't he? During the COVID period. And at that point, I had this sort of unedited project, and I was like, I have to put this out. So I spoke to Jag and spoke to the original agency that I'd shot the footage for, and I said, look, do you mind if I put this out, recut it myself, put it all out? And they were like, yeah, actually, that would be a really nice thing to do. And so I got the sort of the permission to do that, and then it got picked up by Sky Documentaries, who put it out as well. So they ran that for a few months, and then I ended up putting that, and that was really, really special, because that was the last unseen Sterling Moss documentary with genuinely new footage. And we had Murray Walker in there, there was Martin Brundle. We interviewed Jackie Hicks. We interviewed Murray Walker was legendary. He was so much fun. And, all these kind of like motorsport legends around it just felt so special, and still feels so special to this day. And I don't get to make those as much as I'd love to, because you kind of have to be in that documentary world. And I'm sort of so locked into commercials because it's what people pay me to do. I need to just take some time off and go and shoot something.
If I gave you like a sort of loosely unlimited budget, time, whatever, to go and make a documentary, is there one that you're like, I would do that?
I would love to go and do Outside. So Outsiders 2, I would love to go and do again.
Yeah.
Or maybe reset it, because we're at the end of the era with that whole world. Like the street drifting scene has pretty much relegated itself to private moments in the mountains. There is still some stuff that happens, obviously, but it's not as prevalent as it was. But also the fact that the cars, they're less and less existent. That the scene is still vibing, but it's not where it once was. But also just to speak to the legends and say, it's now 30 years since you started doing this. Like, you're now, these are the Derek Bells of the Japanese cars, and you want to hear these stories from these legends, or hear these old war stories about.
You must have some unbelievable stories.
There would be some silly stories, but you just need to do that. I'd also love to do the classic GT1 era. I'd like to do late 90s, early 2000s GT1 cars, and just there was a period of time where those cars were just unbelievable, and that. Such a special time. Those shots of F40s chasing F50s and GT2 Porsches, with a McLaren F1 trying to barge its way through. And it's how is this a real race? And it was Le Mans, and it happened loads, and it was So I think that period of time, I think there's some good stories that haven't really been properly covered yet.
Yeah,
that's where I would probably do that.
Super sick.
Yeah.
Super sick. Well, I'm conscious we're slightly running out of time, so I'm going to try and shoehorn the end in before we have to cut. So I normally do 5 questions. I know you've listened to some podcasts before, so you might have a bit of a clue. I'm going to chop it down to 2. What's your most memorable driving trip or journey?
Driving through Japan in a caterum for a week in the rain. Absolutely bananas. Just the wrong car, but couldn't have been better. We were shooting a McLaren commercial, but because they're the same company in Japan, same importer, we needed a car that had a little roll cage at the back we could film at the back of. And they were like, well, the only thing we've really got is a Chiron. I think it was 270R. So I spent the entire week doing burnouts and wheel spins on motorways. It was the best fun. It was No one else wanted to drive it. No one else was interested. And I was like, I'm gonna 100%
That's so
take that
funny.
mantle on. Yeah.
That's so funny that like they stock both those cars. Like
Mhm.
I can't comprehend a dealership in the UK being like McLaren and Caterham.
Yeah, they had Lotus as well. That like the Caterham was
All
the
the
most
drivers'
helpful.
cars, I guess. Like
Yeah.
perceived
Yeah.
drivers' cars.
Yeah.
5-car garage, unlimited value.
Has to be Diablo GTR is my
Ooh.
absolute dream unobtainium machine.
Yeah.
I would want a pre-runner, some sort of pre-runner off-road truck,
Yeah.
like a converted Bronco. There's a guy in America who's got this beautiful like 60s Bronco, 70s Bronco pre-runner truck. About 800 horsepower rear-wheel drive. That'd be perfect. I love I've got an old 86 Corolla drift car, which is my favorite. It's my absolute. It's the most fun you can possibly have. It's impossibly slow and crap to drive, but my God, it's just the best thing when you're trying to like fly it. It's 100% commitment of everything. I would. The other two. I'm going to start going into like. I would want a mega turbo, like super laggy, like 1500 horsepower Japanese something. Not sure what that is. Probably a Toyota as well.
Chiron.
To film Chirons from, because you just need something that's just like uncontrollably fast. And then I would probably go 993 GT2, I think. Like proper,
Nice.
like race car, like full-on race car. That'd be it. Yeah.
What is the question that you get asked most often by random people, or what is something that you feel like might be interesting that you should say that I've not asked you?
The question
I
easily get asked the most is, how do you get into it? Like it's how do you get into it? How do you get started? And I get so many people message me asking, I'll come on set for free. I'll come and do this for free. I'll hold bags. I'll do anything. And the answer to that is it's really hard to do that, because you still have to pay that person for insurance. You have to feed them. You have to get them there. And actually someone on set who's not doing anything is really annoying. It's really useless. And that's why these people won't be able to get onto much professional sets. So what I always say is, if you've got a way of shooting something, be it on a camera or something, prove that, create, make it clear that you can do stuff. You've got style and you've got a talent and a useful thing. Like, some people on set are just useful because they know what they're doing. You just wind them up and let them go and they'll create footage for you. And that's really awesome. So having that person who can show that they can't not just create Instagram reels that are pretty, but they've actually got fundamental film technique understanding, that's incredibly helpful, and that goes a long way. At that point, you can then kind of hopefully join up other people on the shoot, and you just kind of have to find that way. I think a lot of people assume that they can run it on their own and hope for the best, and that's absolutely fine, and you can definitely do that. That's But I think networking with the right people and being able to put yourself into a place where, should that moment happen where you are available and there's a space for you, you can fill it and go jump into it. And it's being ready to do that and being as helpful as you can. Learning a skill, like a lot of camera people these days don't need to. They have a gimbal and an autofocusing camera and they kind of think that's all they need. But if you want to get on a proper set, like if you can focus pull, if you know how to actually be a good second AC or a good first AC, that actually is really important. And those people will end up, making careers of that, because that is incredibly valuable. I've got a good friend, Michael, who's a stunning first AC. I know he's a brilliant DOP in himself, but he's one of the most fastidious camera operator assistants that I know. He's incredibly good. He really can do way more than that, and I'm underselling his skills, but like, if that's all he ever wanted to do, he could easily make a healthy career out of that. So I think people forget that there are talents that you need to have, or skills that you can pick up that make yourself useful.
And would you say CGI, if someone was thinking, I'm starting to make films or whatever, should I lean into CGI and start dabbling with that now, or is that just like a preference thing, or what do you think? What do you think about like going those two ways?
Like me, know thy enemy is always like, if you know how it works, you can either use it to your advantage and say on shoots that you can bring it into part of the creative process. If you love filmmaking and you love film, like, it's realistically, most people want to film real things.
Yeah.
But if you can get into the CGI stuff and make it useful and have it as another tool in your chest of creative ways of shooting, I don't consider myself a CGI artist. I just happen to be able to animate in CGI as an additional part of the process. Or at least that's how I try and think about it. And I don't think it should be mutually exclusive. I think there is a huge crossover, because fundamental film techniques don't change whether it's in CGI or in real life. You still light things with the same ideas. You've got a few more tricks perhaps you have to do in real life that you don't have to in CGI, and vice versa. There's tricks that you can have to learn. But I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think if you can download Unreal Engine for free today and start learning today, and it will work on a relatively decent computer. It doesn't have to be a monster. And you can start creating films. Whereas you might have to invest in £4,000 worth of camera gear to get a gimbal, a camera, a lens, add this, that, and the other. So maybe there is
a car in a location and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, you think about it, like, actually trying to shoot car to car, you need to have 2 people, absolute minimum, ideally 3. And like, where do you just get 3 people from? Where do you get this road? Where's this safe place that you can go to? Can you afford the fuel? Is the car good? Is it insured? Blah, blah, blah. So like, there is that. And CGI is incredibly useful these days for car companies because, as I said earlier, people are struggling to make prototypes work. Getting hold of engineering cars is really difficult. And you know, people can change their spec on the car halfway through a shoot. I've had it where they've changed their mind about the alloy wheels. I joke not. We've had to replace alloy wheels across the entire film. So it gets, you know, there's advantages. But as I say, don't keep it mutually exclusive. I think it's like what you feel in your heart is the way to do it.
Yeah. And if you're the person directing, you know, if you're a director, your thing is making the film and making the film great. It's like you've then got all these tools. It doesn't matter really what atmosphere, where you're doing it. If that's the thing you want to be, you want to get to be making the stuff.
It's all about, it doesn't matter what you film, how you film it. It's all about the end product. Student films, you know, like we're at the Motor Film Awards, you know, there's a category for student films, and they don't look at budget at all. They don't look at the technical, they don't look at the quality of the camera or the lens. It's not taken remotely into account. It is the fundamentals of what you're making right? And it doesn't matter whether you've shot it on your iPhone or whether you've shot it on an Arri 35 with a set of master primes, doesn't matter. Is the story, the editing, the cut, the tone, does it work? Does it make sense? Even experimental stuff, you know, you can see it. There is good experimental stuff, and there's just some stuff that's just absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
And you know, you can cut through that quite easily if you know what you're looking at. And that's the thing. Like, if you're good at what you do, people will find a value in it and get you involved. I think a lot of people think what they do is okay because they've copied something that works, or they've just created like a series of shots together, but there's not really anything to it. It's just they've just created like 20 shots and gone, film, there you go. And you're like, well, it doesn't actually do anything. There's no personality in this. You've just created a montage of shots that a computer could have just put together. So there is that, you know, what is your little hook? What's the little secret sauce that you bring to your shots and your filming?
Yeah. Nice. Well, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. I feel like we've plenty more things we could talk about. But yeah, thanks very much.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Sweet.